little presentations prepared for it. So basically, this session is about understanding the architecture of Service Desk Plus. So basically, what Service Desk Plus is made up of. So we're going to be looking at the on-premise model today. So what is Service Desk Plus made up of? That's basically what gives us the detailed information about the architecture of the system, and we will also be looking at some of the showstopper issues, basically any critical issues that customers may face in the environment while running Service Desk Plus in their production environment. So we will list down. I've listed down some of the showstopper issues as business critical problems. So we'll be looking at those issues, and we will look to troubleshoot them and resolve them. And part of that, we will also do some log analysis. Yes, somebody trying to talk? Are we good to go? All right. Again, as you used to do, any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask me right away. All right. So let's get started with the session. So first of all, we're going to look at the architecture of Service Desk Plus. So this is what it is, as you see. So basically, Service Desk Plus runs on a framework called Mickey. That's a Zoho's proprietary framework. So if a framework is a new term, a relatively new term to anyone here, let me give a short introduction about it. So basically, framework allows the software developers, the software application development easy. Makes them just concentrate on the business core logic rather than writing codes or developing core services that is generally used for for most of the web-based application. Again, so Service Desk Plus is a web-based application. So I'm sure you all have experience accessing or seeing some of the web-based applications in your lifetime. So basically, for a web-based application, you need your application to provide web access and database access. So if that can be provided by a framework, then it's easy for the developers to build business logics and not to worry about those basics like database operations, like creating records or accessing records or deleting records from the database. So they don't have to worry about those. They can just focus on developing the new features or business core features. Like if it's a help desk product, they can start focusing on features towards that. If it's desktop central, they can focus on doing endpoint management related features and so on. So framework is basically providing all the core components that a web-based application is needed. For example, database access. So it's called persistence module, and security. Yeah, security comprises of user management. Like you see that requested technicians profiles in the system, right? So that part, and authentication, which is a very, very important one. I'm sure you all have had a nice first day session with user management, learning about SAML, single sign-on, AD authentication, and more, right? So those authentications are basically developed within the framework itself, so that our Service Desk Plus application developers will not write those codes into the system. They will just concentrate on other areas of the product rather than worrying about authentication, authorization, and logging modules, right? Those are all some of the components provided by framework by default. And of course, the framework has bundled Tomcat within it. So Tomcat provides web access to Service Desk Plus, and of course, persistence provides database access. So those two are the main important modules for any web-based applications. And then it also provides some other components such as task engine. So whenever there is a schedule, right? So scheduling of reports, backup scheduling, data archiving scheduling, all those schedules are taken care by task engine services. So you would have seen that when you start the application, actually, when you start the application via command prompt, if anybody has seen that, you could realize that it will load up all these components as modules while starting Service Desk Plus. That means task engine will start, that is taking care of all the schedules and stuff. And similarly, you would see connection managers, and a user authentication modules, everything starts up to bring up Service Desk Plus as a whole application. So anyway, we're going to be seeing that quickly. So that's enough about a framework. So basically, framework provides is used to write code once and use it across all other applications. So I'm sure you would have seen the bundle of ManageEngine on-premise solutions we offer in the first introduction day. So almost all our on-premise applications under ManageEngine hood uses this framework called Mickey. So let's move on with the other sections of the session. So these are some of the showstopper issues that I have listed down for the session today. So for a customer, when application doesn't start in the environment, there is no other business critical issue other than this, right? So we picked up as a top one, and even in our support, we treat that with utmost priority. So if a customer complains or reports application startup failure problem, then we do anything to resolve that as soon as possible. So that's our number one priority, and we will be looking at what are the different possibilities for that issue to happen, and possible troubleshootings and possible root causes for those issues. So based on my support experience, I've come up with some known use cases, some known root causes for these issues, so, and also to resolve that. And while I'm talking about it, I also want to inform you guys about the test lab I've created. So I've tried to simulate some of the issues that I have listed down here, so we can do a real-time troubleshooting while we are talking about it, right? So, and these are the issues: startup failure, mail fetching, mail sending failure, of course, backup restore failure, or again should be treated with priority if customer is stuck with upgrade failure. For example, upgrade failed, and they would try to restore the backup that was taken before the upgrade, and if that fails again, the production will be down, right? So it should be given the top priority again, and then application crash, performance degradation, right? So slowness while accessing Service Desk Plus. There is no other issue that could frustrate the customer than spinning modules, right? So when they try to click on something, if that keeps spinning without any result, then that would create utmost frustration to customers. So we want to address that as soon as possible at any cost. And then finally, login failure. So this could happen in a very controlled environment where if the customer is running Active Directory authentication with domain controllers connected to it, and if there is any problem with that, then users will not be able to log in using AD credentials. So then that could happen. So we're going to be addressing all those issues one by one. So let's begin. All right. So this is going to be like let's make it like a conversation. So well, this is the customer perspective. Service Desk is not starting, right? So what would be a response as an engineer working with customer, right? So you would first want to know, is that the absolute problem or is that their perspective? So you want to address that part, because most of the times customers would say Service Desk is not starting or Service Desk is not working, right? That could mean a lot of different things, right? Whether they could be meaning that they're not able to get into Service Desk, or the Service Desk page itself is not working. It could mean a lot of things. So we want to make sure that we get rid of those doubts and make sure that we are on the right path. So the very first question you would probably ask is whether are you getting the login page, right? So if the login page is up, then it's not a startup problem. It must be either login issue or something else, correct? Then you're going to be moving on to the next, probably next troubleshooting step, which is access the application directly on the server. Well, it is when they say the page is not up, right? So when they say that the page is not up, the login page is not coming, then it must be something to do with the network connectivity also. So we're not sure about it at this point. So the next possible thing you would ask is whether you have access to Service Desk server. If you do, just log into Service Desk server directly, open up Internet Explorer or any browser, and access the application using localhost URL. Because localhost is accessible only on the local server, not from client machine. So that is something that you would ask them to do. The reason why we want to do it with a local host is because sometimes due to DNS problem, the alias that you're trying to access might not be resolving to the actual server, or if the server's IP address has changed, then that would again create problems with DNS resolution. So those are some of the possibilities. To just narrow down them, you can access the application using localhost URL directly on the server. Next step is, once you are on the server and you don't see services page coming up even with local host URL, the next step would be checking out the services, because ManageEngine Service Desk Plus will be installed as a Windows service. So Service Console will have a registry for ManageEngine. So you would try to access that particular service. You'll check out the service status, and if it all goes well, you would be able to start that successfully, because sometimes service status might be set to manual, and due to a server restart, the service might not come back up. So in that case, just going in and just clicking on or starting the service alone would do it, but that's very unlikely, right? Because as far as my experience concerned, customers would themselves figure it out. They'll try to start the services by themselves before they are approaching to us. So you could probably eliminate that. But again, checking the service or restarting the service will give you a fair idea whether it is starting or it is keep getting stopped, right? So the next step would be trying to start the application from run.bat. So tell me, how many of you have tried starting the Service Desk Plus application from run.bat with your experience in service? I'm sure I haven't got the complete picture of everybody, so I'm not sure if you're mixed here with experienced and the new B2 Service Desk Plus. So excuse me for that. But I would assume that you all have a bit of knowledge about Service Desk Plus before coming in here, at least to start Service Desk Plus from the command prompt. If not, that is fine, because I'm going to show you guys anyway how to start that, how to follow all these steps one by one with our simulated server environment. So that's the next thing I would do: run.bat from CMD, from command prompt. So you would need command prompt to be run as the administrator in the elevated mode, and then execute the batch file. So that batch file basically starts the application. Whatever you do with services is what has been done with run.bat file also. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with the issue troubleshooting. Okay, there you go. Assume this is the Service Desk Plus server the customer has reported the problem with. So the first thing we do is we check Service Desk Plus from the browser. Localhost. So no response, web page cannot be found. And the next step is access the application URL directly. That's done. Then check the service status. There we go. So services.msc. And you have a service name called ManageEngine Service Desk Plus, and that says nothing, which means it stopped. So let me go ahead and start it. So it says running, but I don't believe it. I'm just going to wait for a second and then the page to see if it's actually running. It is not. So that gives us a clear picture that service is not starting, meaning something wrong with the. So before I begin, I just want to give you guys an introduction to a file, a log file called wrapper. So wrapper is a bundled service in ManageEngine.
Nagaraj, we are not able to hear you. Hello, Nagaraj? We don't hear anything. I don't hear anything at least now. Also, same is the case with Subodh and Sagar.
Even nothing is visible for me also. Nothing.
Hello. Am I audible now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nagaraj.
Good. Is my screen
Yes.
visible now?
Not yet.
Screen not visible yet. Okay, 1 second. I think there was an interruption there. Okay, give me 1 sec. Let me see if Jay is there because he's the presenter. He has to approve um, me from sharing the screen. So, Jay, are you here with us? I think he's not. Let me contact him to uh, uh, give permission. Uh, please hold on, guys. Thank you. All right. Is it visible now, guys?
Yeah.
All right. Good. Okay. Can you tell me, at which part you lost me, guys? So I can
Or
just restart from where I left off.
you were talking about the wrapper log.
Wrapper log. Perfect. All right. Uh, Lucky that we didn't move on. So yes, I was talking about wrapper log. Uh, the wrapper log will give us the details about what actually happened when you start or when you stop services from services console. So in this case, it's not much helpful for us because it says problem while starting server. That's all. Not much to go with that. So in that case, we would obviously go on to the next step, which is starting the application using a run.batch file from the command prompt console, right? So,
Nagraj, Pooja
okay,
here. From where to get that wrapper file?
yes. So you access the wrapper file from ManageEngine service desk logs directory. You have a wrapper.log file right here. So this is basically the directory where you find all the logs in it. Probably you lost me there when I was talking about it when you all had trouble achieving. Yeah. So you can access the wrapper log right from here under service desk logs directory, and this is the place where we have all logs available. So we'll get to them. We'll get to some of the important logs, right? But for now, we'll start with the wrapper. Wrapper basically gives you information about the startup activity. All right. Are we good with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. All right. So the next step is to start the application from command prompt. So, well, all the batch files in the application are located under service desk plus home directory and bin directory. So basically, program files managed in service desk. Bin is where you can find all the batch files that are to be executed in the application. We'll see more and more often. We might ask you to go ahead and execute a batch file from here. If you want to take a backup, if you want to take it to restore, we might ask you to execute restore data.bat file over here. And then if you want to connect to the database, we will ask you to do start db.bat. So all bunch of batch files are here. So we would be getting here when we needed at times. So for now, we are just going to be using the run.bat file. So to execute that, open up command prompt in the elevated mode, run as administrator, and then navigate to the bin directory. That gives you access to all batch files. It's there. Yep. Now out of here, we want to invoke a run.bat file. So that is basically going to try to start the service desk, and you can see the message right here why the services did not start, why the application is not starting in the first place. It says port 80 occupied. So service desk plus is using port 80 by default. That's what is said by the administrator. But in this case, port 80 is being occupied by a different application or something else. So we don't know what it is yet. And it's asking us to change the web server port and start. So what would you do in this case? What is the ideal thing to do in this case? Do we go ahead and change the port and start? Are there any consequences by just changing the port over here and starting? It is, right? Because all the users are known to access service desk plus without any port number in them, right? If you just change it to 8080 or 8081, then next time when they wanted to access, they have to enter port 8081 on the browser URL every time, which you can't expect every end user to try and do, right? Sometimes even if you do push announcements and everything, they would obviously miss it and get back to IT every time, right? So that's something we don't want to do. And then there is an important consequences, the asset management perspective, because I'm sure you would have got information about configuring agents for end user PCs, right? So if you change the port number over here, then the agents would lose contact with Service Desk Plus, because when you install the agents, they would have been installed with port 80, and if you later change them, then the next time the agent want to communicate back to the server, they would be trying to point back to 80. At that particular instance, there won't be any application running on 80, right? So communication loss will be there, and that would end up in a scan failure all the time. So we don't want to change the port number just like that. We want to find out what is using the port 80 and how to release that, because if this is a server dedicated for Service Desk Plus, then strictly 80 is for Service Desk. No other application is allowed to be used. Yeah. So to find out what port is using what, there is a network statistics command, netstat, with a parameter ANO to list out active connections alone, and along with a find string that is going to filter out ports that are whatever number you mentioned over here. So if I go with 80, then whatever port string contains 80 is going to be returning. So there you go. It's a huge list even then. Okay, there you go. The very first line is what we want, because local address 000 refers to server, the local host, and port 80 is what is being used by that. And you can see that the last column is the PID or process ID, right? It denotes the Windows process. So to access the process by ID, you need to open the task manager from the Windows taskbar or toolbar. This, yeah. Then you have the column right here, PID there. But if you don't see it, you just need to enable it by right-clicking over here. There's a bunch of columns available. So pick up a PID from the list, and that will list down the PID. So you can sort it out also if it's not ordered or if it's not in order. So you will find this as PID 4 is basically being used by the system, right? Which is tough to identify what actual system process is using it. And you cannot just kill that also, because you don't know what process is it actually. So, but based on your experience or expertise on different Windows system services that may use port 80, you can get to an idea fairly. So in this case, there are very few Windows services or Microsoft services, application services that use port 80 by default, such as IIS. If the server runs IIS, then there is a strong chance that IIS could be using port 80. But in this case, of course, it is not. So IIS is striked out from the list. Then the very next possible cause could be the SQL reporting services, right? So Microsoft SQL Server, if that is running in this machine, so from the look of it, I can see there is a SQL Server Management Studio window right here. So that gives us a good idea that SQL Server might be installed on the service. So let's have a look at it. Yes, so SQL Server is installed on this particular server, and all those servers are running. So out of which there is a special service called reporting services in SQL, which uses port 80 by default. So there you go, reporting services is actually running. So in this case, we're going to be stopping that because this server is dedicated for service display. So SQL reporting services are not supposed to be running on them. So might have been restarted or something could have happened because it is set to run automatically. Even service displays is set to run automatic, but during the restart, it always prefers Windows native services at the top, right? So when you start, when you restart your server, you would often see that Microsoft native services would come up first, and then a bit of delayed time you could see third-party services being come up. So that's basically how it's working. So that might be one of the reasons why SQL reporting services has taken over port 80, and then service displays was trying to start, and then didn't have port 80 available then. So that was a possible theory. But in our case, we understood that SQL reporting services could be possibly using it. So let's go ahead and run a netstat again and see if port 80 is still occupied or available. All right, that looks like port 80 is freed up now. So let's go ahead and start the application using run.bat again. Okay, that's good. It didn't say port 80 occupied anymore. So that was our first cause. Okay, I'll just quickly run through the slides. Yes, web server port is occupied. So that is one of the common cases we could see in customers' environment. So you would have to do all these to get it down. At the very worst case, when you have no idea what port is being used, right, by Windows, by system service, or what application is using port 80, you could just Google it, because that's how we found out that there are a list of services or applications of native services, native Windows services that could be using port 80 and 443. So we would check one after another and then just do a hard guess. All right, the next possible root cause would be database connection failure. So that is.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Like, you have stopped the service which is related to MS SQL, correct?
Yes, that was a SQL reporting to services. That is not going to create any impact with the SQL server, because reporting to services basically is used to run reports. So that's not going to create an impact to the SQL server running there.
Even if the
Yes,
MS SQL is the
that is correct.
database for the HDB.
That is correct. That is correct. Because reporting to service is a separate engine. Basically, this is a reporting service engine. So that is running separately to collect data and run reports. So it shouldn't have any impact on the SQL server.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Okay. So it says problem while starting server again, system halted. So this time again, there is no luck with command prompt either. So this is the time to take a look at the server logs. So again, you will go back to the logs directory and access server out log. So server out log is something that you would hear from us quite often. If you are dealing with support with ManageEngine service desk support, we would ask you to get us the server out logs every time you report some issues with the server, right? Be it a mail fetching problem or a startup issue, backup, not backup, but performance issue, whatever it is, right? So we would ask you to get the server out log, because this is the log. This is like a backbone for the for troubleshooting, right? So every server activity is recorded in here. So server out 0 among the other server out files is what we prefer, because that records the latest activity, and in that server out file we get to go to the bottom of the file, because that records the most recent activity at the bottom of the line. And we can see here quite clearly there is an exception from Microsoft SQL, says user does not have permission to perform this action. Just straightforward, isn't it? So as soon as you open the server out log, you get SQL Server exception with the message clear. So then we have to work on what could be the communication, or it could be either the SQL credential. So it does not talk about service desk user, by the way. So it talks about SQL Server credential that is used in Service Desk Plus to create connectivity, right, to access the database. So the next step would be finding out what are the database credentials that are connected to or that are installed in Service Desk Plus. So there is another batch file called change_dbserver.bat. So invoking that batch file will give you a little wizard with all the information you want about the database wizard. So it tells you there's a host name. This is where Service Desk Plus database is hosted. So obviously it's a SQL database here. So while we talk about databases, Service Desk Plus provides you two options to connect to, and out of which PostgreSQL Server is the bundled database. It comes free with Service Desk Plus installation. For customers who do not have any external databases available already, they can go with PostgreSQL as their bundled database, which just works fine. And for customers who already have SQL in their environment, they can use SQL Server over here and provide the credentials like the host, the server name, the port number at which the instance is running, and they can create a new database with the database name and credential, of course. So the credential to connect to that database server. So here, let's go ahead and give a test, and it says connection established. I just got a ping, so let me see if somebody wants to talk to me. Okay, Krunal asked, if SDP not installed in the same machine, is it possible to get the log file from other system? Not possible, because logs are located in the physical server on the server itself. Either you have to do a remote, or you have to connect and access it via network if it's shared across. Otherwise, there is no option to get it from the from another application. Of course, we are looking for possibilities to integrate with log analysis systems like Splunk, right? So when that's probably available, then you can see the logs in real time with another third-party application. But at the moment, you'll have to either log into the server, or there is another option to download the logs using ManageEngine Service Desk. So I'll show it to you once we get the page access. I'll show you how to download the logs. But in this case, logs cannot be downloaded because the server itself is down. So you have to get into the server to get the logs. I hope that answered your question for now. Thank you. All right, moving on. So connectivity with the server is just fine. So physically, the SQL Server, Service Desk Plus is able to connect to the SQL Server just fine. So let's try to save it. There you go. This was the problem. So during the save action, we actually test whether Service Desk Server is being opened or is being accessed by the credential that is provided here. But in this case, it cannot. Service Desk Plus database cannot be opened by this particular credential over here. So let's take a look at it. So does anyone know what are the minimum permissions that we need to enable for this credential over here, for this SQL credential we provided? Because not every customer wants to provide their SA account, right? They don't want to enable their super admin account for Service Desk Plus database, correct? So they would obviously be very restrictive or limited about the kind of credential they want to give it to Service Desk Plus. So now we know that Service Desk Plus is running on this database, SDP-win-4, and it's using the SDP login. So in this case, let's take a look at the server roles that it's got. Basically, it doesn't have any special server roles because this login is a dedicated one for Service Desk database. So in that case, let me first check whether I can see the database in here. Yes. So it's got the database, right? So we are on the right server then. So going back to the account, you have user mapping. So that is where you can see the Service Desk database is mapped to SDP account, and the permission that it's got is actually public, data writer and reader. But for the database to access it, and open it, it needs the DB owner permission at minimum. So if your customers are concerned about enabling server roles like sysadmin or server admin, then just don't worry them. Simply ask them to enable DB owner permission alone for service desk. That's quite enough for the application to start and run fine. All right. So I've enabled DB owner permission now. Now let's try to start it. Or before that, probably let's try to save the connection again and see if that works. All right. So test is fine. I just hit save. Let's see. All right, database created and prepared. That means we are good to go. So let's try to start Service Desk Plus now and see what happens. All right, there you go. So you remember I was talking about different modules, part of the framework like authentication, authorization, audit, task engine, right? These are the modules that start when you start Service Desk. And the modules that you see over here, Asset, CMDB, Help Desk, these are business logic modules that our developers wrote over the framework. So basically, that's this is how it starts. It starts all the basically it loads all the containers, all the modules, and then it creates and then it starts. So once it is started, we will get a message saying you're good to connect to the server. So we have to wait till then. So this is a good sign saying the application is now starting. So let's go back to our possible root causes. So MS SQL startup issues. So all those comes under MS SQL startup issues, like the permission. Sometimes the password could be invalid. So the password might have been changed by the user, or somebody would have revoked the account itself. So under those circumstances, you would get to see Service Desk not connecting with a SQL server. And the second one is talking about database connection failure, meaning physical failure. So if there is a firewall, a restriction between Service Desk and database, then you would often see this. So you'll have to do probably telnet the port, the database port from Service Desk server. If that goes well, fine. Otherwise, you'll have to just create an exception in the firewall on the database server to see if that makes any sense. All right. Let's see if it started. It's still starting.
Nagraj, I have a question.
Yes.
So when you install Service Desk Plus, so what is the default DB user gets created?
Okay. Basically, so I mean, you wanted to talk about the database Postgres, right? When you install Service Desk Plus.
Yeah.
So by default, Postgres is installed because that's a bundled one. Okay. And along with that, you have an account created called SDP admin, right? So there is a default admin account created, and that has admin privilege over Service Desk database alone. All right, because the reason why I wanted to point out that is earlier we used to create the database with Postgres account itself, that too without any password. So that was open for vulnerability. So we patched it by creating a custom account during the installation itself. So from then on, if you want to access the default database, then you will have to enter the credential. So I'll show you guys the credential real quick, right? When we get onto the logon failure or login failure issue, we would anyway have to connect to the database. So at that time, you would have to enter the credentials to unlock the database. So I'll show you where to find that. All right.
Okay.
And by default, we don't have any option for MS SQL, because MS SQL is something that customer have to enter, right? Because MS SQL is not bundled with it. So this applies only for Postgres. And we've got a chat. These troubleshooting methods are similar for all Windows. Yes, Nishu. These are similar for all Windows, because these troubleshooting are related to Service Desk Plus on Windows environments. So it applies for all. So did that answer your question? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Let me see. You're welcome. All right. Now it says connect to client at localhost 80. So that's a good sign. So I'm just going to just refresh the page to see if the page comes up. There you go. So default credential is this, but since this is customer environments might be disabled, right? So let me go ahead and check the other possibilities for the logon issues, startup issues. Sorry, it says license expired or invalid, right? So that was a problem we used to have. So, but we no longer have that issue anymore because customers who run service desk plus license, if license are expired, then they wouldn't be able to start service desk plus anymore. So that was the issue we used to have. But then we fixed it by switching the application to free edition automatically. So if license expired in customer environment, it would be switched back to standard edition with I think 1 or 2 technician account possibly. So just 2 technician account with standard free edition is what they'll see when they log into Service Desk Plus. That means they need to apply or renew the license quickly. All right. So those are some of the issues that we come across with starting Service Desk Plus. Next, let's move on to login failure. Yeah, this is another very frequent one we get from our customers, right? So basically, they'll again come up with the saying, unable to log into Service Desk or Service Desk is not working again. So the very first question you ask, have you tried with the, maybe before that, you just want to find out whether they can access the page also, right? If that is a yes, then you would ask them to check whether they could try with their colleagues' AD account, whether ask them to check with their fellow colleagues to log in with their AD account into Service Desk. If they cannot, then that sums up that it could be possibly the connectivity failure between Service Desk Plus and Active Directory. The reason why you want to try with a different AD or local account is because not local account, but with a different AD account is because sometimes frequent incorrect password attempt could lock down customer's AD account, right? If somebody is trying to keep on logging in, then that might lock them out from the domain. So that could possibly a reason. So you just need to figure it out. And then if the other person is also not able to log in with their AD account, then we could confirm it could be something to do with the Active Directory communication with Service Desk Plus. Then we can move on to further troubleshooting steps, like we can check the database and connect to database. And once you're connected, if it's MS SQL, we don't have any problem, right? Because there is a SQL Server Management Studio right here. You can just open it. Okay, let me show you guys how to connect it again if you want. Basically, this is how it would be on the SQL Server. So see Server Management Studio. So these are management tools for SQL Server. If they don't have it installed already, you can download and install it. So I think it's a free one. So you then need to connect to the database. If the database is on the same network, you can connect from anywhere else. Because right now I'm on a different server, but I can still connect to this database server right from here with a SA account, of course. So by doing so, I got connected to the database with the SA credential, and I can see the database also. So this is how you connect to database and execute query. Quite straightforward. But if the database is not PostgreSQL, right? If the database is, not MS SQL, the database is PostgreSQL, then it's not that easy that you can just use your mouse alone to connect to it. You'll have to enter some credentials also. So then in that case, it changes a little bit. So let me show you how that works here. Let me try to connect to one of the PostgreSQL instances. There you go. So to connect to the Postgres, you first probably want to find out the credentials, because if the customer has changed anything in specific, you would want to find it. So change dbserver.bat again. Same for MS SQL environment too. So you could see that the server type is PostgreSQL, not MS SQL. And then you can see the host name is localhost. That means it's on the same server where Service Desk is running. And then the port These are the credentials you would be using to connect. And then the database name is service desk by default. And this is what I was talking about. The default credential is SDP admin. So this account does not have complete control over Postgres itself, but it's got control, unlimited permission that is needed for service desk to run on. And then you have a password. So you can find the password from our troubleshooting guides, but I will just let you the password out right now. It's SDP at 123, all lowercase, to connect to it, because we're going to be connecting now. So to connect to the database, you need to get to the PGSQL bin directory. So there is a bin directory under PGSQL 2. So you just need to connect to it using a psql-.exe, and then -u represents username. Okay, that's my habit of connecting to Postgres all the time. But here in this case, I'm going to use SDP admin account, and then -p represents port, not password. So port number is 65432. And then -d represents database that I want to connect to. So here, service desk is the database, and then -h represents the host name. There you go. So those are the credentials we need to connect to the database. Let's see. There you go. It's asked for password. The password is SDP at 123, all lowercase. And there you go. You're successful. So now we got connected to the database. So this sign over here means that you are successfully connected to service desk plus database. So you can access it right from here. Like you can just check out any particular table data you want. Say, for example, you want to check out the configurations there. So you just simply run a query, right? Like that. So it's going to give out all the data that is there in that database. So we will X out right from here without anything. So that's basically how you connect to PostgreSQL database. And for your information, right, at the moment we have PostgreSQL version 10.12 with the latest version of Service Desk Plus. So if customers running different versions of PostgreSQL, it is possible they might be running the older version like 9.2, 9.4, right, in different instances or different versions of our product. So then there is a chance that they won't be requiring password anymore, because as I said, we have started securing the account very recently. So meaning if any customer had a older version of Postgres running, so they would be able to connect without entering the password. Yes? So just to give you an information about it. All right. So moving on, we just connected to the database, which is fine. The next step would be resetting the local auth password for SD admin account. Yes. Why would we need to do that? Because we cannot get into Service Desk Plus with the credential that is generally used, right? Okay, let me close down this one. We don't need it anymore. All right. This is my AD account, and that doesn't seem good. All right, I'm going to use Chrome. Okay, if it's usually taking that long, that could mean that it's going to end up so failure. Got a pop-up. Which version of JavaScript and jQuery supported by the tool? All right, we use jQuery as our framework. So I think at the moment we are using 3.1, but I'm not sure exactly. But I can check that out for you. We can check that out later. All right, here we go. It says username or password is incorrect. So in that case, we have to reset the password. So to reset the password, we have a bunch of KB articles available in our application, in our portal. So if you have previous experience connecting to pitstop.manageengine.com, so that's our portal, pitstop.manageengine.com, and then you can just click on Service Desk Plus here, and you'll see a bunch of articles available, knowledge-based articles. So basically, I manage all those articles. So I would appreciate your feedback on any new articles you want out there, because to my knowledge, we've got everything we need to get started, like from a customer perspective or from a partner's perspective. We've got basic articles like how to perform an action within Service Desk Plus, and some of the issues have been listed out also. Some video tutorials available also. So if you find anything not there and you think is important to be added, please feel free to reach out to me again. So as I am the knowledge base management owner for Pitstop articles, so you can let me know. So for now, I'm just gonna just search for the article. So I'll just probably say password reset or something. So it just comes up the very first article, how to reset administrator password in Service Desk Plus. So you could see a video tutorial also, and you have a bunch of step-by-step instructions available. So, and you can see the credential also over here. So if it's PostgreSQL, then you would see a lot of information available right here. So in this case, ours is a MS SQL edition, and the build that we are running is actually 11.1 and above. So I'm just going to you have to use this query right here. You can read out the instructions later. I'm just going to jump on to the steps right away. All right. So it lists down all three org admin accounts that we have. So I could see there one mine, and I could see default administrator account. So this is a default administrator account with the login name administrator. Of course, the password might have been changed, so we don't have that password. That's why we are resetting that password. So the very next step to reset that password is there is a query available right here, and this is for Postgres, and this is for MS SQL. So we need the one for MS SQL. So we can just go ahead and copy this MS SQL query. And go to our here we need to replace the login ID. Remember, from the first query you got the login ID, which is 2 for default administrator account. You just have to replace that over here with that value. Execute. That gets you the result. That one row is affected now. So let me go ahead and try logging in now to Service Desk Plus. And by the way, the default, the password after resetting the account through query is this. So you could see that after resetting the password, you'll be able to log in with the password admin, ADMIN, all lowercase. So now let me log in. Login name is administrator. Password is admin, ADMIN, and it's a local account. Okay. So we don't have local authentication available here. We just have the domain alone. So that is another problem, because this customer environment might have disabled local authentication completely. So right now we need to enable the local authentication, but since we cannot log in, we cannot do it from the user interface. So we have to enable it from the database again. So for that, you can watch the step 8. If local auth is disabled in the application, you can execute the query to enable it. So just copy down the query right here. and paste it. So this query basically enables a local authentication from backdoor. So, and I think that step requires a application restart also. So restart service desk plus once after executing the above query. So for the changes to traffic, because the reason why we want to restart the services because service desk after it started using the cache services over here, right? You see that cache service? It actually caches the database, the details, right? DB cache. So out of which some of the global configuration items are also cached into the local system. So changing the data in the database wouldn't actually directly reflect until you reset, because when you restart, this cache service gets rebuilt again with the updated changes in the database. So that is the reason why it requires, because these are some of the items that do not require to be fetched every time accessed from the application, right? Because these are not something that that are going to be changing quite often. So that is why we have cached them all. All right, let me start it back. So when we start back, the cache service will find the difference. So last time it was false, and now after restarting, it will be changed to true. So this new cache will have the value set as true. So even if you change it in the database, it wouldn't change unless you restart. So that is mostly the reason why we want you to restart after running some queries or executing some queries. If our technicians ask you to do so, this would be the reason behind that. All right, while it is starting, let's probably understand the possible root causes, right? Why it could be failing to log in to Service Desk Plus. Yeah, so that is another important thing we need to understand, because most of the times, our customers might be reporting problems with starting Service Desk Plus. I mean, logging into Service Desk Plus when their AD connection, is blocked. So we need to investigate, to find out a quick way to find whether the connection, the communication between AD and SDP is active or valid or not, right? So starting. Let's see if there's any questions asked. Questions? All right. So assume we just reset the query and logged into SDP, which we will be in a minute after it started. So the possible root causes could be domain controller could not be reached. Yes, as I said, when you configure Service Desk Plus with Active Directory information, you basically integrate AD with SDP, right? You configure the domain controller details and everything. If there is a change in the domain controller, right, then Service Desk will not be able to reach out to the new one or updated one from here. So that could break the communication, that login permission, login access right here. All right, started. Let me connect back. Just do a quick refresh on this page. Username administrator again, password ADMIN, all lowercase, and there is a local authentication this time, and not in domain. So okay, I might have understood that. ADMIN, local authentication. If not in domain work, then choose domain. Simple. There you go. So we are in now. So services, finally we started it after all the struggles, and we reset the password to log in also. But this is not the solution yet, because we logged in with a domain account, with a local authentication account. Still Active Directory authentication is not fixed, right? So to get that fixed, we gotta go to admin, domain details, where you set up. That's under Windows domain scan. So there you see the account is set up, but from the look of here, we don't actually find anything wrong, right? It all looks good. But then how do I validate it? How do I validate whether the configure details are correct here? As a partner, as a technician, I wouldn't know, right? Maybe our customers would know from the first look of it that okay, something is wrong here in this page. But then we wouldn't know. But to prove them, we have another option here. Okay, this is actually ESM version. So You've got to jump into ESM directory over here and Active Directory to check whether the Active Directory is in sync with Service Desk Plus. You can click on import. It pulls up all the details from domain scan and simply click on import now. See that the OU is fetched. Again, this is from cache, so don't believe that yet. Just click on refresh button at the right top corner over here. So when you hit refresh, it actually does establishes the connection with the Active Directory at this particular instance with whatever the credentials we have. Meaning, it does not retrieve the OUs list from the cache, but it directly connects to the domain controller to fetch the latest updated OUs. So that in a way gives us a the actual reason. There you go. Couldn't bind to AD server. That was the reason why AD was not able to connect to it. So in this case, in most of the cases, it could be dealing with Windows domain controller. So in our case, I actually know what is wrong. So it's pointed to domain controller 2, but it is supposed to be connecting to domain controller 1 due to some reason. Yeah. So let's do a refresh again and see. There you go. That is a good sign. It fetched the OUs pretty quick. And even if you do an import, it will just run fine. But to validate it again, you can go back to, you can just log out and log back yourself with the domain account, not local authentication. There you go. That's it. So the login failure problem is fixed now. And the possible root cause is domain controller could not be reached or enumeration failure. So enumeration failure could also happen due to bad credentials, but those were the possible reasons for login failure issues. All right, let's move on real quick. We don't have much time. So mail fetching issue would be again another possible ones. I mean, frequent one we get from our customers, because I'm sure most of the environments would have enabled their service desk with mail fetching ability to convert tickets when email is sent out. So that's a crucial part. That is not working. No new tickets are coming in, or no replies or existing conversations get appended to the existing ticket. So that would be definitely considered as a business critical issue. So we got to step in and act on it fast. So to find out what do we need. So let's say the customer calls you and say, there is a mail fetching issue with our application. No new emails are creating as tickets, right? So what would be a first step towards the troubleshooting? Yeah. So we have basically Service Desk Plus is just a mail client in this case, all right? Just like Outlook, how Outlook displays all the emails when there is a new conversation, how it appends to the existing email, and when you send out an email, how it puts back into the sent items. That's basically what we do with Service Desk Plus. So Service Desk Plus is a mail client, but instead of storing it as an email, we're creating it as a ticket. All right. So when they report mail fetching is not working, so we got to check whether the credentials that are provided, the connectivity is valid, the credentials provided are intact. So we got to check all that. So the first step is stop fetching and save. All right. If it's keep running, just click stop fetching and save once. So let's see. Just ignore this one because the license is expired, and that is why you're getting this one. Remember, I told you that if license is expired, it switched back to standard edition, free edition, which just one login is allowed, just the administrator alone. So the administrator alone can log in and apply the license to bring back the original application version. But for now, just ignore that. We can go into the mail fetching directly, mail fetching issue troubleshooting. So under admin, you have mail server settings. So there you have all the settings you need, or all the controls you need to verify whether mail fetching is working or not. So on the incoming tab, you have the server details, username, password, email, protocol types, everything. So at the moment, it is already stopped. So you don't need to stop. So you can just simply click on save over here. The reason why we need to stop it is because when it's running, the save button would not be working. It would be grayed out. So you just hit save once, and that would validate the credential with the server and let you know what is happening. It's spinning around. That means it's working. It's trying to establish the connection. So at the moment, it is using IMAP S, secured version of IMAP protocol. port 993. So it's still trying to establish the connection. When you hit save, basically it is trying to validate, it's trying to communicate to the server, and yep, there you go. It says unable to connect to the mail server, probably host is unknown or not reachable. So yes, so that's a valid message. Again, the very next thing you do is open up server route 0. That's all. So you open up server route 0 and you get to the bottom of the log. And then from there, you might not see the exception right after you open it up, because sometime before you open it up, there could be other actions could have overwritten the log. So you might have to just go up a little bit until you see that. So I would give you out a keyword to look for mail fetching traits. So just type in mail fetching task without any space and just click up. So that would give you, there you go, all bunch of exceptions there, but it's not the one yet. So you still have to take it up. The reason why I'm saying it, this is not the exception related to mail fetching, is because you see this mail fetching thread is on 133, right? But the exception stack trace here is on thread 109, which is completely different. So you don't need to stick with that. You can still go up. So 113. Okay, there you go. Says exception when connecting to store. That means it's unable to connect to the mailbox, and it just clearly said could not connect to host on port 993. This is the server where Exchange server is running. So this is very straightforward. So let's go ahead and troubleshoot that. So the first thing you do, if you want, you can just do a telnet on that to confirm whether communication with the mail server on port is just fine. So you can just do telnet on the mail server, which is SDP-win-1, and on port 993. And if it's thinking this long, this means it couldn't connect. There would be a problem connecting to it. So in this case, there could be only two possibilities. Either something is blocking the connectivity from service desk plus to the Exchange server, or the Exchange server might not be running those services anymore. The services might be down or something. So to investigate it, you can directly connect to the mail server. So you can open the services console again, because everything with Windows is on services. So in services, there you go. So Microsoft Exchange services, two services actually are not running. That could be because they are set to run manual. So they might have not start up automatically after a recent patch update or a restart happened on the mail server end. So those were the possible reasons why mail fetching was down. So you just have to go and start it. So to verify whether that fixed the problem, you just have to click when do a telnet again. So there you go. This is a good sign saying the connectivity is fine. So let's go ahead and hit save again and see if that fixes the problem. There you go. So that was quick, but it still is not successful because we got another exception saying could not find valid certification path. So kindly apply trusted self-sign certificate. So that's what we get. I'm sure most of you would have seen this message one or the other way with any secured application communication. So if two systems are going to be integrated or communicating together, right, in a network, if one is securely installed with the SSL certificate and the other one doesn't, right, then you got to copy that the certificate copy, the public certificate of that SSL certificate over to the other application, to establish the connection with the public certificate, right? So during the SSL connection establishment, it requires the public server certificate to establish the or to successfully complete the handshake process. So that's basically what is lacking here, because mail server is protected with the SSL certificate, but it doesn't have service desk doesn't have a copy of that. So due to time constraint, we are not going to go through the process of generating the certificate because it is very self-explanatory. But I'm going to just give you guys the article here, right, with the step-by-step instructions along with video tutorial to see how to generate the certificate and apply, right? So you could just again search for any keyword. You could say mail server, or you could say certificate issue, or GenCert, or trusted certificate. So it would all come up. So you could see that, and you could also look for certificates. Simply type certificate, you will also get it. So you can see that apply mail server certificates in Service Desk Plus with the video tutorial and with step-by-step instructions. And so this gives you a good idea on setting up the Service Desk Plus with the secure certificate from Exchange Server. All right, so that was the second possible issue with mail fetching. Any questions, guys? Are we good?
Yeah, Raj.
All right. Good. So yes, I think we halted with the presentation because we went ahead with the presentation. So yeah, get the exact message thrown after the mail server validation. So I said stop fetching. Yeah, when you do stop fetching, you get the and say when you get the actual message, whether it is the communication failure or it is the certificate failure, you get that. And then yep, could not find validate certificate path. That was the second case we discussed. And then problem connected to mailbox was the first one. Authentication failure is another case, right? So assume that the password entered here is incorrect or has been changed, right? So you would get that authentication failure problem. So you would have to fix it by resetting the password simply. And then finally, the connection would be fine. The connection, when you hit save, it will say all good. Mail fetching is saved successfully, everything. But when you hit start fetching, it wouldn't fetch emails, right? That is still a problem. But in that case, what we would basically want you is to get us the logs. So what log would you get out of here? What log would you possibly get out for us? So it's a server out log, right? So remember, any server related activity, if you end up facing server related issues, please get us the server out 0.log file. So that's what we want to apply or to analyze from support end. All right. So there was one other question asked: how to access the logs without logging into the server? The answer: if you have access to Service Desk Plus and if you logged in as an administrator, right? So you can go to the community tab over here, right? So the community tab over here gives you full access to troubleshooting files such as threadump, support file, logs, everything. So you can see here, you can click on support file over here to generate the support file quickly. So this downloads, I think, 2 to 3 files on every variant to your local browser. But if you want to view the logs alone, then you have an option over here to click view logs. So that gives you the access to search for the logs. So here you have server out, logs, everything. Wrapper logs. If you want to find a wrapper log, you can just access it and the browser will open it for you. So this is another way of seeing the logs without logging into Service Desk Plus. You just have admin access, you should be fine. And the other one is still downloading the logs, I believe. It's just zipping the logs. So once it is done, you will see a zip downloaded to your local machine. You can open it and access the logs through that also. So those are the ways to open logs. Okay, so those were some of the common issues we might face. I would say top 3 issues, right? Application startup failure, login failure, mail fetching issue, and of course following by that is mail sending. So we're not going to experience the real time anymore. So we're going to quickly go through because the troubleshooting method follows the same for the rest of the issues, right? So you will just get the server log here. What I meant server log is server out log. So when you analyze server out log, you would actually find out what is causing that mail sending failure. Yeah. and then you could find some of the possible causes, like if there is a relay connectivity failure, or if the service, if you enable the mail sending with SSL certificate, but actually the SMTP services is not assigned with any SSL certificate, you would get this error. And then connection timeout. So it is another issue that happens quite often. Then finally, authentication failure. So in all these circumstances, all we want from you is the server out logs. So with that, with the help of that one, we can analyze the issue further and help you out. Then backup failure. So customers who experience scheduled backup failure, automatic backup failure issues, you could ask them to try manual backup once. So let me show you what batch file we use to use. Because remember I told you, for troubleshooting or for taking backup, we have a batch file available. This is what it is, backup data.bat. So just running this batch file will take the application, the complete backup of the application. But if you don't want the complete backup, right, because it is going to include file attachments, images and everything. But if you don't want to include all that, just database backup alone, all right? So in that case, you can use this argument called --trimmed, yeah? That would just take the trim backup alone, right? The database version of the backup, and you could see that going to take minimal backup without file attachments. So that's going to be a little faster also. So to try out troubleshooting things, you can do the backup like this and see if that works out. If it does, then it must be something to do with the schedule. So in that case, we want you to get this SD backup log file, right? So let me show you where the backup log is located. So if you go under SD service desk plus home directory and then bin directory, you will have SD backup log right here under bin directory. Unlike other logs, this is not located under logs directory. Remember, it's under bin directory. Okay. So for your information, we can, with the help of that, we can find out what is causing the issue. So some of the possible issues are, assume the file, access permission could be a cause, right? So if the file is not, got a message. Let me quickly answer that. Do we have server IP and REST details same for, okay, what was it? We have server name, IP address, and REST details same for incoming or outgoing. It can be same in most cases, because most of the customers would be using server name, or IP address for both incoming as well as outgoing. But in special cases, they wouldn't be using outside transport security. Like for example, customer has Office 365 purchase, right? So they wouldn't want to be using Office 365 for their internal transport, for internal mail sending. So they might be using internal transport SMTP services for that purpose. So in that case, the outgoing may not be the same as incoming. All right. In that case, it might change. So I hope that answered your question. All right. So SD backup log helps you figure out what could be the cause here. And some of the cause, file access permissions and incorrect SQL collation. Yes, that's another reason. But I don't think we no longer have that issue, because the collation is what we suggest is actually right here in our pit stop portal. If you just navigate through, say if you just type collation, you'll find out nothing, because we are under video tutorial. That's another thing with our KB articles. So if you want to search something, just have to go back a bit. And you can see that the default collation that we suggest is this SQL Latin 1 General CP1 CIAS, case insensitive as, right? So that's the short for it. So this is the collation we suggest to set up in our database. If the customer has incorrectly set up something else, there must be trouble with backup, schedule backup. So you gotta fix that one. And then low disk space. Obviously, if the destination drive dedicated to store the backup does not have enough disk space available, then that could fail. Then finally, you could also configure network drive for storing backup files. So if there is a problem with the network drive connectivity, if due to some reason, if the connectivity broke or connection broke, network connection problem could also arise to this problem. So these are some of the issues that we talk about. And then restore failure. So this is mostly when customers have problem with restoring the backup after upgrade failure, right? So we want you to immediately help us with these information, like check out the restore status.xml file and approach support me directly. So I'll help you out to find out the right person to work with if I'm not available to help you out right away, so that we could try to help the customer as soon as possible. All right, some of the root causes are probably when you create the new database, tables not properly created. So troubleshooting would be dropping the tables again, dropping the database and recreating the database, and starting and stopping the application once would resolve the problem. And then build incompatibility. Sometimes customer might be trying to restore an old backup version into a new installation, right? For example, the latest version is 11.1 with 124 build. But if they have a backup for 10.5, right? If they try to restore that onto 11.1, that wouldn't work because Service Desk Plus is a build compatible system. So any backup that's taken on the same build should be restored. So that wouldn't work. And then duplicate key error. So those are some of the problem within the data. So in all those cases, we would need the error information from you to help us with this. Again, to carry out this restore activity, we want you to execute the restore with the help of this batch file. So there's a batch file called restore data.bat. All right. So when you execute it, before you execute that, you can redirect the log like this. Say restore log dot text. If you do that, any command prompt, everything that is happening in the command prompt would be taken as an output into that text file. So that would later you can refer that, and it will open up the small wizard again. So you can browse to the backup file and initiate the restore. So that's basically how it works. So due to corrupted backup, yes, if the backup that's taken couldn't be opened, then restore failure could happen. So those are other reasons. And then finally, performance issue. So when application crashes or slowness while accessing the application, so we want to get very important details such as performance analytics logs, right? So this is a very, very important point, guys. If any customer reports to you that when logging into Service Desk Plus, it takes minutes, all right, because nobody wants to sit on the login page forever. So if at all it takes that longer, then we want to find out what is wrong and fix it right away, because they could even cope up with mail fetching problem or application login issue, but they cannot cope up with the performance issue because it's making them wait on something, right? So that would obviously frustrate anyone. So we understandably have to fix that as soon as possible. So to fix that as soon as possible, we want you to try out a few things like collect the logs and then approaches. So some of the possible options are no managed connection could happen. So in that case, we would ask the customer to enable read committed snapshot isolation. So we have a bunch of articles available for it already. And then thread log. So another threadump file. So threadump file is a log file that traces all the current threads that are going on. So due to thread deadlock, application schedules could not be running fine. So that could also raise to the performance issue. And then slowness using when running long queries. So for example, when customer try to access the request tab, it takes a long time. Then that could be basically the query that runs at the background has not returned on time. All right, it might be occupied on to something else, or it might be waiting for the previous query to complete. So those are some of the reasons. So in all such cases, what we basically want you to do is execute this URL simply. So I'm just going to show you guys that URL. So you first have to be logged into Service Desk Plus as an administrator, and then localhost / servlet / performance debug. So this is the URL to remember, servlet / performance debug. So when you hit that, that is when you when the problem is happening, right? It is going to generate all the logs that is needed for troubleshooting. You don't need to do anything else. We don't want you to go in and fetch the logs one by one. Simply execute this URL when there is a slowness reported, that is, you have to do it on that instance itself. For example, if you can recreate the slowness like by clicking on something, right? So it's going to spin around for a long right for a time, and in that meantime, open up another tab and hit the URL. So this would generate whatever the performance analytics logs we need and zip it into that logs directory. As you can see here, successfully generated the debug logs. Please zip the logs folder and send it to support. That's basically what it says. So you wait for the message. As soon as you get the message, we need two things from you: the time at which the issue was recreated and the logs folder, the entire logs folder here. Just zip it out and post it to us. So that's basically what we want from you to proceed further. See, what basically misses out here in this case is, we might not get the logs on time with the proper debug files in it, right? So we then have to go back to the customer and ask them to recreate it again. Since you being the closest to the customer, you have an option to probably remote control them or even step into their office to collect whatever the information you need. So those are some of the advantages you have over compared to a support sitting in Chennai, right? So in that case, we would rely on you to get all the performance debug logs in the first instance itself, if you can, so that we don't have to get back to the customer often, or the iteration of asking for logs or files could be reduced to a great amount. That in turn would increase the resolution time, would lead to a great customer satisfaction there. So that's basically what our goal is. So zip the log files, send it to us. That's all. We will take care of it from there. So basically, that's all from me for today. I'm sure it's it's informative, if at all. I'm sorry it's been a long session, almost from 2:30. Yeah, 4 hours, 5 hours, I think 4.5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have apologies for that, Naga. I'm really sorry. I've eaten up a lot of your time. Yeah, this is Jay.
Okay, that's okay, Jay. That's fine.
Yeah,
as long as
I didn't expect that
we
we
can
can go for more than three.
Sometimes we
hours.
get time and get involved into so much.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
whatever we want to give, whatever we can give to our partners, we would love to give them. So that might be time consuming, but that's fine. Anyway, we wanted to we covered up everything we wanted to. So I hope the session was informative and useful. So if at all you have any questions, please go ahead before we wind up the session.